Hello and welcome to the last session of this year's Streaming Media West Connect. I'm Eric Schumacher Rasmussen, and I'm the editor and VP of Streaming Media and also the conference organizer for all of our in-person and online events. Speaking of in-person, we've got Streaming Media East planned for Boston in May of 2022. So we'll be announcing more information about that soon, as including the call for speakers. So if you're interested in joining one of these panels or making a presentation, or even just proposing a topic you'd like to see us cover, watch for the call for speakers coming out probably in the middle or end of next week. We'll also be sending out the call for speakers for our next virtual event, which will be in February, and it will be called cleverly Streaming Media Connect February. A couple of housekeeping notes before I pass things over to our moderator and panel. If you do have questions for the moderator to pose to the panelists, please put them in the Q&A. I'll be keeping an eye on them back here, and then I will pass them along, or perhaps I'll even just come on screen and give them to the panelists toward the end of the discussion. Live transcripts are turned on, so if you want to turn them off, you can go to the bottom of your Zoom window, click on Live Transcript, and select Disable Subtitles. That will turn them off. Finally, just for being here, you're entered into a drawing to win a $50 Amazon gift card. But here's the catch: you must be present to win. So we will be announcing the winner of that gift card at the end of the panel. I'd like to thank our diamond sponsors who have sponsored all of these keynotes, presentations, and panels. Conviva, Limelight Networks, Signient, and Video Guys, and we've got short video messages from each of them right now.
In this era of streaming video, we are pioneers, helping make your stories more vibrant. Conviva lives in billions of apps on devices all over the world, measuring trillions of data points each day to provide real-time insights for your content, ads, and social. Conviva. Every stream, every screen, every second.
VideoGuys.com is your source for live production gear, and we can help you start streaming today.
Reach a wider audience and tell your story using equipment like the RGB Link Mini family of 4 HDMI mixers, YOLO Live YOLO Box all-in-one touchscreen mixers, streamers, and recorders, and PTZ cameras and controllers, perfect for productions of all sizes without a large production crew.
Go to VideoGuys.com or call us at 800-323-2325 for help and start streaming today.
Thanks again to our sponsors, and thank you to Brett Sappington for agreeing to moderate this discussion about how normal is the new normal. What is this new normal we're looking at, and how does it compare to what we've seen in the past? So, Brett, good to see you again. Saw you yesterday, and now you're on the other side of the desk or something like that?
I am. I get to actually hold the reins on this panel. So thank you for taking that risk.
Well, as you proved yesterday, you're quite adept at taking those reins. At any rate, I will pass it over to you, Brett, and ask that all of our panelists turn your cameras on and your mics, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Absolutely. Thanks, Eric, and thanks everyone for tuning in today. My name is Brett Sappington. I'm Vice President at Interpret, where I lead Interpret's entertainment video research practice. We provide global data and insights related to content production, pay TV, streaming services, and technologies. So we keep up with what's going on in the streaming space all over the world. So I wanted to begin by talking a little bit about the panel and what we're going to be discussing today. So the pandemic changed everything. I'm sure that there's not been a panel that we've had that's not made some statement like that. So much so that everyone really expects that. But what we've really seen is it didn't just change consumers. We've seen increases in consumption, but it really changed a lot about how the entertainment space works, both in front of and behind the camera and with services. So what we want to talk about today is we want to look at those changes, but which of those changes are going to stick around? What stays resident? And how will that impact our industry going forward? Let me put a few numbers up on the screen to show you. This is from our Video Watch set of research services. Let's see, I think you can see that now. So what we have here, this is looking between 2019, so this is mid 2019 to mid 2021. So before the pandemic, right up until the point where movie theaters and other things really began to open up, right as the pandemic, I'm going to say abated a bit during this year. So one of the things we can see, this is actually showing the change in the number of hours and the change in percentage of people enjoying each of these entertainment areas. And so what you can see is people were watching more short clips on the internet. They were watching.
Brett, I'm going to interject. We are not seeing your slides, nor is the audience.
Well, then let's go with this. How about that?
There we go.
Okay, I see nodding heads. That's fantastic. Okay, so now you can see this is showing the change in hours spent viewing and change in the percentage of people that are actually doing more of this activity. So you can see about an hour per week more spent on were spent on short clips. About 13% of people were watching these short clips. We see movies and TV shows. We see increases in volume of consumption there. But at the same time, we also see a drop of almost an hour per week in broadcast TV and cable network viewing. So we see a big change in terms of consumption. And if we go further, we can see how that change happened not just in video entertainment, it happened really all over. It happened in podcasts and mobile games in the movie theaters. So podcasts, 12% more people were watching podcasts, 23% more people were playing mobile games. And typically the amount of mobile gameplay increased by 2 hours or more per week. This is also right when movie theaters began to open back up. And so we saw 30 percentage point fewer people in 2021. Again, not a surprise. We knew that it was lower, but it was a lot lower even coming out. So those were big changes. And in many cases, it was online viewing. It was over-the-top video viewing was where the real change was happening and where that content was being watched. So we have in our panel today folks from different parts of the industry. Let me get you each to introduce yourselves. Jennifer, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey there, I am Jennifer Gale. I am the Vice President of Sales and Brand Partnerships for Crackle Plus. It's a leading ad-supported OTT service. So we represent our O&O properties like Crackle, Popcorn Flicks, and then most recently launched Chicken Soup for the Soul Network. We also hold sales rights to a growing portfolio of streaming services, including Funimation and Crunchyroll, Plex. Those are a couple to name a few. So I've been really immersed in the streaming space for quite some time now and really looking forward to being here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. Let's go with Chris. Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself and White Label.
What's up, Brett? I own White Label, which is a full service production company. Been in this business for 23 years, primarily focusing on unscripted, every genre, every platform. And basically the niche and target I focus on is producing anything from, $50,000 an episode to $4 million an episode shows more cost efficiently than a lot of people out there.
Great. Well, thank you for being here. And Nicole, tell us a little bit about yourself and Culture House.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. We're Culture House, and I'm one of the founders. I'm also a producer, director, showrunner for the company and head of production there. Our company really focuses on the premium doc space. So right now we have premium doc shows that will be on Netflix and Hulu and Disney Plus coming up in the next year. I was really excited to run the show for Disney Plus with Brie Larson. So that was exciting.
Awesome.
Fantastic. So let's talk about what's changed. But as we talk about change, I'd like to really focus on some about the degree of change, but also how that's impacted your company and may where we're seeing change happen in the industry as a result. So Jennifer, let's go back through the rotation here. What's changed between 2019 and 2021? What's really changed in your business?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say, of course, viewership, right? More people were spending time at home, more people were absolutely streaming video. So our viewership and numbers certainly went up, but I think, our bread and butter at Crackle Plus is really our originals and exclusives. That is something that we have a really robust strategy where we are releasing, an original and exclusive, at least one or two every single month. And that's something that I think while people were in the pandemic looking for additional content, new ways to view content and programming, we definitely saw our viewership increase there as well. And then alongside that is really just our strategy and our approach to our originals. I think at the onset of the pandemic, so much of sports was really non-existent for the obvious reasons. And I think, we really tried to help fill that void for a lot of our viewers. And so we really zeroed in and honed in on bringing, sports documentaries and series to our user base. And that was something that was a strategy that really kind of sparked through the onset of the pandemic. But because we've seen such success there, it's something that we've continued on ever since. And then I think, from an advertiser perspective, with more eyeballs and viewership being there, advertisers want to be able to reach their audiences in a very addressable way. So really kind of sparking third-party relationships with data companies like a TransUnion and TrueOptic, or being able to measure that incrementality from linear TV to the streaming world and sparking partnerships with like an iSpot, for instance, to really measure that incrementality. So definitely a lot of changes. I'd say those are probably the most noteworthy for our company.
Interesting. Okay. So I want to come back in just a little bit. We'll talk about originals. We'll talk some more about sports. And then advertisers and the data area, because I think data, clearly one of the trends that we've seen a lot of changes in prioritization of data and how that's really affecting a number of things in the industry. Chris, let's hop over to you as I'm filling out this list of things we're going to talk about. What's been going on with White Label? How have things changed in your business over the last 2 years?
Well, I think first off, I'm going to steal Jennifer's word of incrementality. Big fan. But it's twofold from a macro perspective. To Jennifer's point, sports went away. So speed came to the forefront of the business, as well as efficiencies. I say speed because sports went away. The quickest turn and burn type of show that networks wanted was unscripted. What they could get on the air to fill those blocks of time that became available. And then efficiencies, it touches upon a few things: technology, staffing, space, post-production. Every single aspect was affected. And it feels like a lot of that to me, and strictly speaking from a television production side, is going to stay. Everybody realized from the production company, the networks, that we can do things cheaper, better, faster. We were forced to discover a new technology to still reach those ambitious shows we were trying to produce, but no longer having the immediate capability to do so. And I think people had to work more efficiently because now nobody was in the same office, so communication was hampered. And I mean, I worked more. You lose the commute of an hour each way. You have the capability to get a lot more done. There's none of the water cooler talk where I'm going to talk about, the real world for half an hour with a buddy while getting a Diet Coke. So it's been fascinating, and I think it's here to stay.
Interesting. Oh, I wish we had a panel just to talk about the psychology of pandemic related work. I mean, I think you're not alone, that everyone, it's like more hours, but you're working at home and there's less of that chit chat going on. So
Yeah, I think it's what is it? Innovation's born out of necessity. Like, if I don't need to talk to someone, whereas I would walk by their office and say hi and chit chat, how's your weekend? Like, you have to call them. So it's almost a proactive thought that you're like, okay, do I actually need to talk to Jennifer? No, okay, I'm not going to call her. So it's become a lot more efficient.
Yeah, interesting. Well, Nicole, tell us about at Culture House. What have you seen that's been different at Culture House over the past couple of years?
Yeah, I think Chris and I both being in the production side and in sales and developing shows and things like that, it's very, very similar. I think on the bigger end, we really gravitated towards, both in our branded content kind of sector and our premium doc sector, we started pitching shows with a lot more animation. So we started really partnering and finding a lot of partners in the animation realm. And then we also, started working with a lot of people that had just kind of finished up filming their stories. And so a lot of times we like to take things from inception and development on. Well, we started partnering with a lot of people that kind of came to us saying, we have now all of this footage that we just completed. We'd love to get into the edit. One of the examples too, we had a Russian surf film actually come to us that said, hey, can you retool this for an American audience? And so things like that. I mean, the biggest example, of course, was I sold a 10-episode documentary series to Disney Plus at the end of 2019 that was supposed to take us into the field, following real young people and pivotal moments across a bunch of themes, 3 to 4 stories of those being international. And in obviously March 2020, they were like, well, obviously you can't do any of that. And so we had to completely revamp the entire show. Disney was extremely cautious. They're still very, very cautious about not letting people into people's homes. We know in the documentary space that you're doing a lot of work with real locations, real people going into those real spaces. And that was all of a sudden out of our grasp. And so we had to just completely, I think Chris said this too, innovation is totally sparked by the parameters that are set. And so we had to completely pitch a new show that then Disney re-greenlit that all took place in a studio where, instead of going and filming about to happen pivotal moments, we talked about them and recreated them in a studio setting. And so that was a really intense process. But I do think that in the creative industry, you find so many incredible producers and people that are just going to figure out a way to tell stories and tell stories that affect people. And so that's a little bit of a micro and a macro.
Sure. So a thread that I see going through all of the things you talked about, one was the idea of originals, creating content, and being able to have unique new content for companies, whether it's a Disney or anyone else. So Jennifer, let's come back to you. For the original, we're seeing so many more originals coming to market now. That's almost become a commodity, that every streaming service needs an original if they're going to actually be able to differentiate themselves. So from the distribution side, what are you seeing is that something that's going to continue, and how is that affecting budgets? How is that affecting strategy for streaming services?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's definitely a lasting change that we're seeing within the industry. I mean, this was something that was happening before the onset of the pandemic, even with the kind of transition from linear to streaming. Similarly, brands and publishers are really making sure that they had kind of the original and exclusive content for people who are migrating that way. I definitely think that originals through the pandemic was the pandemic created like a means of a disconnect from your social connections. And I think for so many of us, our commonality and the common thread between all of us during the pandemic was a lot of programming. What are you watching? Did you see this? And so I think that's just something that has become much more of a common conversation for us. And, additionally, people were definitely looking for alternative ways to find new content. They're dipping their toes in not just subscription services anymore, but, looking for free services that can provide them this really premium content. And so I definitely think it's a strategy that's here to last. And I think brands are definitely going to be forced to, and publishers are going to be forced to kind of create the content that's going to create the demand for all of these different properties. It's definitely becoming a very fragmented ecosystem with all of the different services that are coming into light. So I think in order to play ball, you have to have some really strong original and exclusive content. And then I think from a brand perspective as well, that exclusivity factor is key. Being able to know that there's a true value in working with one publisher versus another because there's exclusive content that their viewers can't get anywhere else really helps define their strategies as well and who they're choosing and working with.
Interesting. So there was a time, probably just before the pandemic, where many were saying that ad-based services really couldn't afford to be in the originals game because they would have such a hard time in paying that off and being able to realize a return. How has that changed?
I mean, it's not necessarily apples to apples for all the players out there. Of course, we've seen a lot of different services kind of go through large acquisitions and mergers with, large holding companies that can help support financially. And, on the flip side, for instance, with Crackle Plus, we have Chicken Soup for the Soul Entertainment as our parent company. And through that, over the years, we've built a whole end-to-end media conglomerate that has whole content monetization and distribution through production studios. So we're able to tap into, a wide variety of different content so that we can acquire them and then bring them to our properties, our O&O properties, exclusively to our viewers.
Interesting. So Chris, we're talking about, so I just mentioned originals and companies, particularly ad-based services, ability to be able to afford those originals. We've seen with I think Amazon Video talking about the new Wheel of Time series, and it's some insane amount that they're paying per episode. What is it? Is it 15 million, 20 million per episode? Something like that. It's up there. So is that sustainable over time? You were talking about cheaper, better, quicker, faster, more efficient. It sounds like the numbers are going higher, even though it may be easier to be more efficient. So can you talk about where the numbers are going in terms of affordability and what it takes to be able to produce good content?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a two-pronged question. I think, and my focus is unscripted. So as networks and more networks than platforms are kind of scurrying to find out where those ad dollars are going. They've, infamously been saying they're going to go over to digital for the last 5 to 7 years. They're going to take their big swings. They're going to have their Masked Singers or America's Got Talents, but they still want that, more cost efficient option game show or something like that. I think, Jennifer knows the space much better than I do, but I think it's essential that these streamers are getting their originals out. Not only does it differentiate them, but you see the Disney Plus is taking back the Marvels and the Star Wars, etc. So the Netflix has to differentiate themselves somehow. I think too, especially the publicly owned companies, I think it's a shareholder thing, right? Where they have to say, yes, we're investing in X amount that we're going to own outright. Because as from the seller side, at least, like you're just not seeing a lot of ownership opportunities anymore, be it unless it's an international format. And even then, streamers and networks want all the rights, both on the format of the show as well as any music in the show. So it's a very interesting time, to say the least. At the same time, there's never been more buyers out there. Like, content is needed at all times everywhere now, more so than it historically ever has been.
So how is that impacting the industry with more So is there actually there's a content shortage right now? Yes, is that what you're suggesting?
I don't know if there's a content shortage. I think there's more opportunity. I think, look, it's always been an issue of those big companies, unlike, Nicole sounds bigger than my company, but it's always been the big companies that have had the monopoly over getting access to sell the shows, especially internationally, right? But then you see now the little guys do get a chance not only to get the international shows, but to produce the shows. Whereas, you know, the big, great companies, the Fremantles, Endemals, MGMs, you see the little guy, Craig Plessis, go and grab Masked Singer and now have this huge international hit and sell it to Fox. I think it's giving more opportunity. At the same time, you're now seeing the big conglomerates try to snatch up as many of the little companies as possible. So it's almost going right back to that monopoly foundation. I actually forgot the question now, but I felt like I answered somewhere in there.
Let me hop over to Nicole, because Nicole, you keep smiling like you have something to say about this.
Oh no, I just laughed at the content shortage. I mean, anytime there's a vacuum, which everybody was afraid of happening with nobody being able to produce content, people fill that. You know, it's not that all of a sudden there's all these buyers and no one, then everybody that was in the business, like so many more people are getting into the business and are doing, you know, things cheaper, better, faster, and oftentimes younger generations have access to the tools that we're working with movie cameras and studio cameras, and people are utilizing now just less expensive and easier to use tools to kind of create the same look and feel and do all of those things, especially when the next demographic that everybody wants to get is used to watching user-generated content. And so then what's happening to all of these kind of premium companies that are creating content on that level, in which that audience isn't really, it's not by any means dying out, but it's definitely shifting. And the demographic of Gen Z and those younger are coming into the marketplace wanting something a little bit more hybrid, or not necessarily wanting to watch what their parents watch. And anyway, I just laughed at the content shortage question. That was my big smile.
So then you're saying that the creativity is there, the opportunity for content, and people, regardless of where any gaps may be perceived, that's being filled in the market right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think anybody's hurting. I think it's competitive. I think it's exciting that there's so many opportunities of places to go and different types of content that's appealing to so many different types of people. I think that we're obviously in the middle of a conversation as a whole media industry, that representation matters more than it ever has, and that people are wanting representative content for lots of different demographics in a way that has never happened before. And so I think my company in particular, in the boutique and premium doc space, is actually really focused. I have two incredible partners that are women of color, and we're in that space. And so the Onyx Collective, which is part of Hulu now, was able to greenlight one of our projects. So our Hulu project is about Black beauty and Black hair. And that's with Oprah and Tracy Ellis Ross. But we're seeing, so not only are we seeing many more buyers, but we're seeing very diverse buyers for the very first time, which is very, very exciting.
Interesting. So more buyers and a greater diversity of buyers. So what is that?
I'll qualify that. I mean, we're still dealing with the older white gentleman that's still at the top, that's making the final decision. But the people, at least on the buying side, are starting to look a little bit different, which is good. But a lot of times you still filter up to that same demographic of decision maker. But I do think that obviously takes time for people to rise to the ranks. But we're going to be seeing a lot more of that, which is extremely exciting, I think.
Interesting. So what types of companies are buying now that weren't buying before?
Well, I mean, I think Jennifer is Crackle is wanting to do original programming and doing all of these things. That's huge. I think YouTube obviously YouTube started as only user generated. And then we actually did a show with them during the pandemic called Barbershop Medicine, about therapeutic practices that happen in the barbershop, and people talking about health and wellness and mental health in that space. But YouTube really getting into the originals game and wanting more premium content as well. But that's not, I mean, Snap, Instagram, everybody's MailChimp came to us looking for an original series. So like there's so many different places that content that wants really great content.
It's not even like the new ones too. It's sorry to jump in,
No,
but it's
please.
like the NBC adding Peacock and so on and so forth. Viacom has like they're multiplying within themselves.
What do you mean they're multiplying within themselves?
Similar to what Nicole was just saying, like NBC now has a streaming service. So not only those buyers buying for NBC, they're also buying for Peacock. Fox, I forgot Fox's streaming service name, but same thing. Not only that they're buying for Fox, they're buying for their streaming service. CBS buys for CBS.com. So that's
CNN
what
Plus,
I like.
Discovery Plus. Yeah,
exactly. So it's not only that one buyer anymore. It's they're all adding. Oh, Fox is Tubi, excuse me. They're adding more content, same buy, but like a whole new platform, which they're buying for.
Interesting. So Jennifer, looking back at the ad space, we've seen a lot of activity in ad-based and ad-supported streaming services over the past few years. We've seen Peacock come out with theirs. We've seen HBO Max now coming out with an ad-based platform. And now we're hearing that MailChimp may be the next place that we all go to watch originals. How does that are you experiencing that additional competition? How is that affecting what you do?
Yeah, I mean, of course it is. It's as I mentioned, I think it's adding this whole level of fragmentation to the world of streaming that at one point linear saw. Now we're just kind of fast forwarding and seeing it play out in the streaming space. But I think for us, because we've always had that exclusive content that we're able to bring to our viewers, and we've had a really well-established brand for many, many years now, we already have a really strong user base. And because we kind of are promoting fresh content every month and constantly refreshing our library and working with all the top studios and networks, we have a strong user base, and we have kind of the content to fulfill that need.
How have advertisers changed? How have brands changed over the past few years?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think really when you look at kind of this onset from linear to streaming, it really is kind of the marriage between two perfect worlds. I mean, linear in the sense that it's this big TV experience, but then with streaming, you get all the added benefits of the digital world, right? And by that, I mean, precise and addressable targeting capabilities, able to layer in interactivity and engaging experiences through advertisements, and the ability to really, measure the ad effectiveness and really validate your digital video efforts through research. So I think because of that, we're all getting, we're evolving with it. We're all getting smarter, and it's really layering up into our strategies as brand marketers. I'd say, I mean, addressability is key. Advertisers are really looking to reach very niche audiences based on their different targets and demographics, and they want to make sure that they're reaching them both contextually and in the right environments. But then also leveraging the power of first-party data with a lot of these partners, as well as third-party through the likes of like a TransUnion and Nielsen and et cetera, to really, garner a lot of their insights that can help them, influence their strategies and who their consumers are, and really connect with them on a one-to-one basis.
Interesting. So Nicole, I think that we had talked about brands as well. From your perspective, what are you seeing in terms of how brands are changing and how they engage with content, or how they need content?
Yeah, and so kind of coming at an opposite angle from Jennifer being on the platform side, I'm on the side of producing content for brands that's more in line with brand storytelling and branded content that's more in that 2 to 3 minute film. I mean, what's interesting, to keep with the better, faster, cheaper thing is, a few years ago, you were able to lock in a great client for a $250,000 3 minute film, and And now that same 3-minute film, they're like, but can you do it for 40,000? And like, it's a very different thing, is people can do that and will deliver that and have the tools to do so. And a one-person band will go out there and make it happen.
But they still want the same quality as the 250.
Oh yeah, of course.
Right.
You could never, it couldn't be less quality. I think so that's one thing that's been a huge shift, I feel like, in the last 5 years, because everybody kind of got into that branded content game. People didn't want to just do the commercial ad and sell the product, but they wanted to sell themselves as a brand, as a company that believed in something more. What we've really been seeing too is this shift to really high-end content targeted towards their own employees, to really sell them, to keep kind of their employees there and happy, and to sell their vision and make sure that their company, especially for big companies, that the employees understand their vision. And so inspiring videos of employees whose lives have changed throughout the company, and why they got into the work that they're doing, and things like that. LinkedIn is now a really big place for branded content, which we've seen. And then, yeah, I think that during the pandemic, particularly, to kind of go back to how normal is the new normal, a lot of brands became okay with more remote shooting and more and not having that high-end director on set, or being able to be remote for those things, and produce content that was digital, or had that kind of Zoom feel. There's a lot of, I think we're burnt out on it now, but some Zoom concepts for that filming that happened, especially in those early days in March and April 2020, and then just really adapting to what was possible in the field, and understanding the new parameters that we were under, that we're not, even in the limited sense, we're not 10 to 15 person crews, we're a 3-person crew, and what is actually possible and creatively conceptual for that.
Interesting. So the analyst in me hears was 250,000, now 40,000. So that's a different margin. That is a different amount of money to play with. Somebody takes a hit on that. Someone is not getting something that they got before. Who is it that's not getting that? How does that affect? It sounds like that means that there's less money going into production, or that someone is just not getting the money that they had before. So how is that playing out? How does that work?
Well, I would say that it was, I don't know if trickle down is the right term, but it was like these really big, like a Radical Media, who's one of the biggest documentary companies, were doing these big films. And then when the budget shrank, there was another vacuum of, they were like, it's not worth it to us to do it for 40,000. So who can? And then those people kind of coming in and filling that space. So it's not like Radical's taking that cut. They just aren't taking those jobs. And so it was really about the brands finding the new partners to do that. And so there's still those budgets that are around, for sure. The bigger budgets that are around, but I do think that a lot of other people were able to get in the game. I'm actually in New Hampshire right now, and there's a bunch of little New Hampshire-based branded content and production companies that have popped up that do a lot of New England-based work, because those budgets shrank and they were able to be more localized and achieve those same ideas. And so I think it's not necessarily that somebody took the cut, it's just that other partners came into play, and in a different way.
Interesting. So on one hand, it sounds like, and by the way, this is kind of open discussion. As anybody wants to talk about this, they can, but it does sound like on one hand, you talked about more companies looking for content than ever before. And at the same time, you're talking about there are now more companies producing content and a greater diversity of people producing content. And they're now producing it down much less expensively than they were before. So it almost seems like there's this new tier of like content demand and supply that's now emerged underneath the more classical high budget production that we've seen. Is that a fair Is that a fair statement or not?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah, and I think though, like even the high budget, like new players are getting into that game, and you know, to Nicole's point, it's not just the U.S. anymore. It's a global market. Like I'm consulting for a huge network and looking to do posts overseas, again, to get the product at a reduced rate, a quicker time period, etc. Like it's just all the rules, and you're seeing like in the old, I think someone said this, like a shift from like that old school mentality where like only this guy can do it, even if he's a dick and throws stuff. Like everyone, and especially the kids younger than us, are like, no, we want to be treated like a human. We don't want yellers. And it's just more, it's like Nicole said, it's more diversified, open-minded, that it's not only these three companies that can do this content anymore. A lot of people can, and we're seeing it emerge with these younger leaders as buyers.
Interesting. Jennifer, any thoughts from your side, from the Crackle Plus side? And I know that you work in, you work a lot with in the ad sales, brand partnerships, and in that area. Are you seeing are you developing relationships with this kind of new tier of creators, and how is that affecting what you're doing? And is it going to last?
Yeah, well, what I actually wanted to chime in with was that to add almost like a new layer of demand as well, is that, you know, brands themselves want to integrate into the storylines, and they want to be a part of kind of the storytelling from inception and kind of naturally weave their brand into the story. And so because of that, because we have a whole production side to our business as well, we have the ability to work with brands and identify, is there a show that we're kind of earmarking? Is there a brand that would be a perfect fit? And if so, being able to work with the brand and understand their strategies and what they're looking to communicate with their audience, and really kind of work collectively hand in hand with them to bring a new story to life and craft a unique series with a brand inspired.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, like I think Jennifer and Nicole said it earlier too. Sorry to jump in. And I'm not an expertise in advertising, but you're seeing these brands now like, well, why would I put my Ford car in American Idol for, whatever, $1 million an episode? I'm making up numbers when I can do my own 10 episode series for $250,000 an episode.
Right.
And where would they distribute that? Does that,
on their own
they go with the content? Pardon me?
And what I'm seeing, and again, these two could probably chime in better than I can, but on their own platform, driving content to Ford.com, I'm just using an example, while concurrently putting on YouTube, etc., social, whatever, to drive it back to that one place. So not only are seeing their product and, stories sell, people get engaged in a brand that way. So it drives it all back and puts some emotion behind these brands now.
Jennifer, are they coming to Crackle and saying, I've produced a bunch of content, can you put it on your service?
Yeah, and it's kind of a mix, a twofold strategy. It's partly that, where they have kind of this idea, this inception of what they've already have in terms of content produced, but then it's how can we take that one step further as well? And so, there's a lot of instances where we can either create a show where it's maybe a 10 by 1 hour series, and then we can also pull different mini-sodes, and there's small short form clips that brands can then use kind of on their own paid owned and earned channels and distribute on social or whatnot, however they choose. But yeah, having those kind of content rights and just being able to weave your own brand story into something that has a lot of legs and can carry throughout, like on and off network, is really key for brand strategies right now.
Interesting. It's almost like going back to really, really old school television, where you would have a particular show, a particular sponsor that's like the sponsor for the show. It was like the so-and-so music hour or something like that. So it's really old television that's coming back into being. So we did have a question that came up from the audience, and it's related to what we were talking about with both new producers and new producers of content and buyers of content. From a business perspective, any thoughts on private equity Are companies coming in, are organizations coming in and scooping up businesses and rolling up either producers, services? Are we seeing any acquisition activity that's affecting either side of the equation?
I mean, a ton.
Yeah.
The CA and ICM just combined forces. I think UTA's got some private equity behind it, but I think Hollywood is still sexy to the banks in the private equity area. I mean, they're always getting engaged. I think it just got announced like Kevin Hart's looking at a sale, and that would be to a private equity company. They still want to be, it's easy access for them to be with a celebrity and to be in Hollywood. I don't think that's going away. They're just a new player in the game versus getting rolled up by some big international conglomerate like the ITVs and Malls Freemans.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, Hello Sunshine, Reese Witherspoon's company,
Right.
sold to Blackstone for like $1 billion. No, it's something close to that, but it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Now we know what number to beat, but that's an unbelievable thing that's never happened before. So I think a lot of people are really interested in that. I mean, A24 has started to float what they might be worth and who might be a buyer. There's only a few buyers probably big enough for something like A24. But I definitely think that a lot of the strategy into building a media company at this point is positioning yourself for a sale, whether to private equity or to be or to an Amazon or even a Netflix, which are starting to look at these kinds of acquisitions. Thank you, Eric. 900 million. And I was like,
there you go.
Here's that extra 100 million, Eric.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I hope that you do beat that 900 million, and I'll invite us to the island that you buy whenever that happens. So let's talk a little bit about sustained change. So we've talked a lot about things that we've seen change, and I think a number of those we believe are going to change. So Jennifer, let's hop over to you. In the ad-based, the ad-supported services area, a lot of that growth happened during the pandemic. Incomes were challenging for a number of consumers, and we saw use of ad-supported services increase. Coming out of the pandemic, what leads you to believe that behavior is going to remain?
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, we saw this whole kind of seismic shift in the way that consumers were really thinking about streaming in general. I think, you kind of hit on it a lot. There's a lot of new different services, especially with the rise in AVOD, but people are bundling and rebundling their own personal bundles, their own personal entertainment bundles. And so, it's not necessarily just those SVOD services anymore. I think, as you mentioned, finances for a lot of people were tight. And so at a certain point, it gets to be a little bit too much to pay for all of the different subscription services out there. And so people really were looking for different avenues to kind of round out and complement their entertainment bundle. And AVOD was truly that answer for a lot of people. I always like to say there's always room for free within your own personal bundle. And that's something that I think just became ingrained. They got to dip their toe in different services and say, hey, there is a lot of really great premium content out there. And it's allowing people to kind of take on different perspectives, see a lot more diversity and different storytelling ideas out there. And so I think certainly people have kind of shifted their mindset and have I think it's here to stay.
Okay. How about on the production side, Chris and Nicole? What changes are you seeing in your side? We talked about companies being rolled up into larger companies. Are we still going to be able to produce, or is there going to still be demand for, there's always demand for low cost production. Will budgets increase? They're not going to increase.
Well, I mean, think like when 2008 hit and the market crashed, all the budgets went down. Everybody was crying poor, advertising dollars aren't pouring anymore, etc. Then after that, with just organic inflation and the market bounced back eventually, the budgets never went up again. So like lasting change from that crash, we saw smaller staffs, less cameras out in the field, etc. So No, I don't think that they will. I'm sure that they will not go up there. You're always going to have the flagpole event show or whatever it is. But I think the lasting change we'll see from this is, I think, technology, obviously both in the field and post-production, more efficiencies. I wonder what office space will look like, just like standard office space rental. What else? I think those are the biggest ones. I think it's, as unfortunate a global pandemic is, obviously, I think it's forced everyone to just, both personally and professionally, like reevaluate their priorities and what's important and how to do things better.
Nicole, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I always laugh because it always feels like budgets are going down. I mean, we've gotten some pretty healthy budgets. I think it's always going to depend on what the content is too. I think it's very much attached to that, but I can't but when you get too big, you create a vacuum and somebody else comes and fills that space that can do it at that price or can do it. And so I think for me, I'm really interested in the creative process as well. I know that this is more of a business kind of conversation and conference, but the creative process, I think, has been extremely affected. I think that was one of the most difficult things about going full on remote. Talking about the water cooler talk, or being able to just pop in, or people just overhearing some of the conversations that were happening, like that's all gone. Like the idea of being in a room, like a writer's room, in which you get to bounce ideas off of each other and have like lots of time and just pop in or steal somebody for a little bit to just have that creative brainstorm. It doesn't necessarily translate to these Zoom calls or phone calls or whatever. You can, and we've learned to do that, obviously, but I don't know that it still gets to the essence of what we had before. And same thing with edits. Like, it's wonderful and it's awesome, Chris, that you're looking overseas for post-production and things, but not being in an edit room is just like mind-blowing and slows it down so much. When you go back and forth on 5 emails and 5 phone calls, and then if you would have just been sitting there, it would have been 5 seconds. And so I'm just really interested. I think that's the only time kind of offices come back, is to recreate that creative energy and be able to bring people together like that. Is same thing for post-production and being able to facilitate that type of those creative elements. But other than that, I feel like a lot of people are now getting pretty happy being able to live wherever they want to live and with the quality of life that they want to have. And so I think people are starting to figure out the sacrifices that they're willing to make within their careers or their process to facilitate those things.
Interesting. Well, it sounds there like there's a type of gravity in terms of having the post-production team together and to be able to be all in one room. Is that enough to where that part of the industry comes back? Do you feel like that's going to return, or will it remain remote?
Yeah, I think that's really tough to say. I think different creators will take a different stance. I think that I will be hard pressed to do another remote edit after doing this. And we're just in this really intense post-production with a post-production team of 10 that are all working at different places. And there's been lots of technologies that have risen up to be able to fill that need. But the times that I have gotten to work with an editor in person, it just goes so fast, and you almost forget when you're doing this remote work how fast it can actually be. So I do think that elements of post-production and writers' rooms and like that type of pre-production will come back. But it's tough to say for everything else.
Okay. Jennifer, let me hop back over to you. So we've seen increases in competition in the streaming space and more ad-based services. Is there more new competition to come, or have we are we reaching some saturation point in terms of the number of competitors that the market can sustain?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think it could honestly go one of two ways. I think, of course, it's an industry that's very much in demand right now because, of course, all the eyeballs are there. And as we've been talking about, there's, a lot of demand for content right now. And so a lot of providers wanting to get into the space. But I do also think we're going to start to see kind of this continued acquisitions and mergers and consolidation in general. When a space gets too fragmented, it naturally kind of has to consolidate. And so I think it could go one of two ways, but I feel like, we might see some partners kind of come out and introduce themselves. But I think at the end of the day, we'll probably start to see some more consolidation within the market.
Okay. We did have another question from the audience. So I think this is more on the production side. Do you foresee these productions, and this is for anybody who wants to answer, do you foresee these productions receiving acknowledgement from traditional industry, perhaps even receiving awards historically for the big screen or TV? So for the $40,000 documentaries, reality TV, for the lower cost, lower budget versions, how are we going to see those affect the awards and kind of the recognition that they get in the future?
Well, I think, to also qualify, when I was talking about the 250 to 40, that was more in the kind of branded storytelling, those 2 to 3 minute films. And they have their own kind of awards circuit as well. I've seen some branded films start to go in the direction of, going for a short doc Oscar, but nothing that's really made it there. As far as our productions winning awards, heck yeah, let's do it. Bring on all the Emmys. And then I think that, I think that at all levels, and there's different kinds of industry awards, like I was saying, that kind of pop up that give recognition in those spaces. But I still think the Oscars and the Emmys are at the top, and they are really awarding. The Oscars documentaries have always been awarding in that indie realm, particularly for documentary. But then also you've seen the influx of indie films make it to Best Picture noms. My friends produced Sound of Metal, which got nominated for 6 Oscars that they made just before the pandemic. And it's really incredible to see what independent producers, small boutique companies, all of those things are able to do, and getting complete recognition from traditional industry standards.
Right. Eric, you're back.
I am back, and I hate to say we have to wrap things up.
Eric,
I know.
we're just getting started.
I know. So, y'all can keep going if you want. But no, seriously, thank you so much. That was a terrific conversation. Covered a lot in an hour. And as Chris said, could have kept going quite a bit longer. This has been a tremendous Streaming Media West Connect event. We've covered so many topics since Monday morning. All of these sessions will be available on demand in about a week. You can go to streamingmedia.com and click on videos and go to conference videos and find them there. Thanks again to all of our sponsors, Limelight Networks, Conviva, Signient, and Video Guys. And thanks to our audience for having such great questions. And speaking of our audience, Sandra Hollingshead, you're the winner of the Amazon gift card. So check your email next week for more information about that. And hopefully we will see y'all again in February for Streaming Media Connect February. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, guys. That was fun.
It was fun.
In this era of streaming video, we are pioneers, helping make your stories more vibrant. Conviva lives in billions of apps on devices all over the world, measuring trillions of data points each day to provide real-time insights for your content, ads, and social. Conviva. Every stream, every screen, every second.
VideoGuys.com is your source for live production gear, and we can help you start streaming today.
Reach a wider audience and tell your story using equipment like the RGB Link Mini family of 4 HDMI mixers, YOLO Live YOLO Box all-in-one touchscreen mixers, streamers, and recorders, and PTZ cameras and controllers, perfect for productions of all sizes without a large production crew.
Go to VideoGuys.com or call us at 800-323-2325 for help and start streaming today.